Hello everyone and welcome back. Games Workshop just dropped some pretty big information regarding Grand Cathay in an old world almanac. This is around building the celestial empire of Grand Cathay. We've got a little bit to talk about here, so let's read over it and let's just discuss, really. So believe it or not, Grand Cathay has been present in the background of the old world for almost as long as Warhammer Fantasy has been around. This is true, but originally Cathay was where Koresh now is. They changed places. A great and mysterious empire far to the east of the World's Edge Mountains. There have been references to Grand Cathay in the margins of rulebooks, bestiaries, role-playing games, and army books. From an ill-started treasure fleet to a scheming diplomat in league with Qianqi, through hushed references to an immortal dragon emperor and more, we've only witnessed Grand Cathay in scattered glimpses. That all changes soon when the Jade Warriors, Jade Lancers, and Grand Cannons disembark in Marienburg from war junks dispatched to aid the Empire in its growing struggle against chaos. So, okay, we've got some information here. It's going to start off with a fleet arriving to help the Empire. That's pretty interesting, to be honest. There are pictures, but I believe that these are all pictures that we've seen before. I'm really excited, and it looks like it's going to be happening very, very soon. I can't wait to get my hands on the Grand Cathay minis. I'm really, really excited. I really hope they don't sell out too quick, because I want to buy a bunch. To celebrate the upcoming arrival, we sounded the war gongs and gathered the original team who worked on Grand Cathay for a wide-ranging interview on how the faction took shape. Over the next few weeks, Old World Almanac will be touching on everything from sculpting to gameplay, but we're starting at the very beginning, in 2018, when a video game studio approached Warhammer. I was right. Oh my god, I was right. I knew it. I knew it was originally the plan from Creative Assembly and not Games Workshop. I was right. I feel vindicated. I really do. Let's continue. Owen. It all started in 2018 when Creative Assembly, the video game studio behind the epic Total War Warhammer trilogy, approached Games Workshop because they wanted to add more factions into the third title in the Total War series. They asked about Kislev first, which already had a fair amount of units described and even designed. But a few of us got together and had fun concepting some new units. This is where we got new Kislev from, which is really, really exciting because Kislev is quite cool. I really can't wait until they finally release on the tabletop also, because we know that they're a faction, it's just you never know when. They came back to us in 2019 and asked if they could tackle Grand Cathay with some... So 2019, the game released in 2022? Okay, yeah, so I'm back. It released in 2022, but originally it was going to release in 2021, so it took 2 years to create that race pack. That's actually quite interesting, considering that it was also alongside other races. We'll talk about this in a Total War style video later. Alright, so where was I? With something so embedded in the background of the old world and yet so mysterious, we told them we need to design the whole thing ourselves to ensure it was accurate to the setting. Yeah, okay, a lot of Games Workshop staff there. It makes sense because they need to make sure it's theirs, right? If they have another studio doing all the work, it becomes a bit of a problem there, especially when it comes to copyright. Okay, Mark, this is a concept artist. We actually started before we knew that Warhammer the Old World was coming back as a game, but we treated the whole project as you would any other new army, starting the work almost from scratch. Then JYT, he's the lead writer. It was a small team to begin with. Mark started doing the concepts while Owen was putting onto the background at the same time, long before anyone else was thinking about rules. I mean, that makes sense, right? Do the lore first and then start doing rules to kind of see how they translate. The first job was to search through all the Warhammer material for references to Cathay, everything that had been written going back to the second edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. There had been scattered references to Grand Cathay throughout the history of the game. But there's been a rich crop of references across the various editions of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay over the years. I'm so glad they've been using Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Like, there's a lot of stuff there, and it's stuff that could be used in future armies, to be honest. Some of these older ideas have been left in the past, but there are plenty of nuggets we reused that Owen first dug out. To give a sense on how well buried some of these nuggets are, he famously exclaimed out loud in the studio one day, "Which idiot wrote this?" before he noticed by the byline and realized it was him. So he's been there for quite some time, it seems. I mean, it's just kind of funny, though, isn't it? I've had stuff like that where I'm going over notes and it's just like, oof. I'm quite proud of the fact that there's absolutely nothing in Grand Cathay that contradicts anything that came before. We've managed to work in all the timeline entries and tidbits from example, the Lizardmen books, the Ogre Kingdom books, and even way back to the second edition, and there were some more than a few apparent contradictions, where the Dragon Emperor has been given different names because scholars don't have full information, or because travelers arriving at the edge of the Warpstone Desert have met a functionary and assumed that they were the Emperor. Yeah, fair play. In the Lizardmen book from 5th edition, there was a story about a sailor from a Cathayan city, an ill-fated treasure fleet that comes to Lustria, which, like a lot of Grand Cathay, is based a little in real history. Everything from his city of origin to the tattoo on his back and the things he talks about have all been worked into the background, of course. Of course, much of this remains unpublished, where we prepared a lot of material for our own background, only part of which is being used for the Old World project. Why? Give us a full source book. Or I mean, maybe Cubicle 7 can do that, right? But I would love to see like a full source book regarding Grand Cathay. I'm really, really curious. Let's go back to JYT here. Before this project began in 2019, there had been a lot of useful references, but it wasn't consistent and it wasn't kept in one place. There is now, but there wasn't a big folder marked Grand Cathay. Okay, yeah, makes sense, you know, because back in the day, we know that Games Workshop were practically losing stuff all the time. So, yeah, cool to know. And then back to Owen here. The most extensive thing that was written about Grand Cathay was in Tamukan, The Throne of Chaos from 2011, also known as one of the greatest campaign books of all time that never got finished. Just the series, not the book. That's where we got the Onyx Crowmen, Shugengan Wizards, and the Warpstone Desert. Were the Shugengan mentioned in Tamukan? I know the Onyx Crowmen were, because everyone was confused considering that the Crowmen were more of a Japanese thing. But yeah, I mean, cool though. All of which will be familiar to fans of Total War. Yeah, we got them in game. Alright, now we're moving on to Rob. So, it wasn't just that we wanted to make Grand Cathay for the video game. We did know that it would all need to be designed for miniatures, because that's what Warhammer really is. Creative Assembly wanted as much as they could get, but they didn't need to think on how it looked on the tabletop. We made sure that we did. Now it's Mark. Some of our original concepts were limited by the realities of wireframes. They can't have long flowing robes, for instance, as it's a lot more expensive to animate. But we wanted those aspects for our models. We worked with them, but we knew that we were able to make miniatures that would be definitive. Yeah, this is why I saw a lot of people going, well, you know, some of these models look too different to what it is in Total War. It's just how it is, right? They wanted something specific. Luke. Anything that went below the knees was forbidden. Okay, that's quite a statement, but alright. JYT, we certainly wanted to be respectful of what's in game. We made it all for them to use after all, but we're now making miniatures based on the original work we did. We're not going to reinvent it, but we certainly do it exactly how we want it in plastic, which is amazing, by the way. If you aren't aware, the whole range is apparently going to be in plastic, or at least all the stuff that's going to be releasing for now. You never know in the future. Owen, Grand Cathay is inspired by Chinese mythology, just as the Empire and Bretonnia have real-world influences from the Holy Roman Empire, medieval France, and Arthurian legends, respectively. Grand Cathay takes inspiration from several of the great and most celebrated Chinese dynasties, but we've made it our own. Everything has to tie into Warhammer, which is the best thing possible. Obviously, from what we know, it's very heavily mostly inspired by the Ming Dynasty, but there is a lot more going into it. Yeah, I mean, as long as it looks and feels like a Warhammer faction, that's the most important part. You don't want something that's just so out there, just doesn't look like it fits in the setting. Importantly, this is a Warhammer take on China. Warhammer has a lot of things, but there are simple tropes that unite it. It's skulls, it's death, it's grimness, but for cultural reasons, many of these signifiers don't align with the Chinese-influenced design language. So we had to think about which other levers we could pull to make sure it was Warhammer. Yeah, so one thing, I think bones, exposed bones, are a bit of a taboo in China for mythology and so on, so it's a bit difficult, I guess, when it's trying to convert to a Warhammer faction. Here we have Owen again. Both Creative Assembly and a Chinese sensitivity team were very helpful, providing guidance, documents to ensure we understood China and we didn't make the wrong move. There are various symbols to avoid, and referencing skulls or gruesomely body horror as a part of Grand Cathay visual language were one of the things we were keen to avoid. Yeah, it makes sense. They're trying to make sure that it sells in China also and it doesn't get like embargoed by the Chinese government. This is likely going to be big money for Games Workshop. Let's just be very clear there. Mark, there are certain styles of clothing and hair which signify darker periods in Chinese history. We had to be respectful of those and alongside these other considerations. There are dynasties which are truly celebrated in China. We made sure to utilize some of the aesthetics from the eras that they spanned. There's a great deal of difference between Chinese, Japanese, and Korean aesthetics, which Westerners can often get wrong. Yes, I'm looking at the potential of terrain for my tables and stuff, or like when battle reports start up again. And yeah, it's coloring for buildings, it's just the style of roof. It's very, very similar, but also very, very different. Just between those three cultures alone, it is really, really difficult sometimes. Luke, we made sure to avoid an ill-informed Western perspective on the design criteria, which is very easy to do by accident. Yeah, fair play. Holly, concept artist. You may also notice some similar approaches in some Japanese media to Western medieval aesthetics, which can also come off as inauthentic. This kind of media isn't bad, it can be a cool way of pushing into new areas of creativity, but it's definitely not historically accurate. Yeah, it does happen. It does happen with like anime and so on, where it's like they're basing it in Spain, but the building aesthetic is actually more German. Believe it or not, like you might not notice, but yeah, there is differences there. There is a lot of differences. Hell, depending on where you are in Spain, you'll see loads of differences there too. In Andalusia, you'd get a little bit more different building stylings to the north. JYT again, China is very proud of its heritage and we're very happy to oblige. Owen, I think the Longma is a great example of what we're trying to do. We originally wanted to make a Qilin, a sort of Chinese unicorn that flies without wings. They're noble, authentically Chinese beasts, but without wings, they don't translate well as a miniature. Yeah, because it'll be like, oh yeah, getting it fly, but how does it fly type of thing. It's always one of those weird things where the eye kind of needs to see what it is. Let's continue here with Mark. We were trying to find a version of a Pegasus for a centerpiece hero miniature or perhaps monstrous cavalry. Owen, you can't just put wings on a Qilin, so in the end we had to put the work in to create our own. Longma literally means dragon horse. It still has plenty of Chinese-inspired elements, but it's now entirely a beast of our own setting. And it looks absolutely amazing. I mean, I love them in Total War. I'm moving the camera around, he's being annoying today. But, yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't look like it's going to be too difficult to paint too, so that's pretty good. Alright, let's continue with JYT. A hovering horse looks great in a still image, but doesn't translate well to the tabletop. We always wanted to try and understand the cultures we use for inspiration, their weapons, their armor, their wars, the things that inspire us without being directly copied. Taking that as a grounding for Grand Cathay has allowed us to do it in such a way that it's appropriate and respectful. Holly, you have to take design decisions because they look right. But when you're deeply into a project, you can uncover a whole new layer of meaning in your work. Owen, the mountain armor is another example. It's a strange type of linked armor that may or may not actually have existed. It appears on sculptures and in pictures of mythical Chinese heroes, but no one has been able to replicate it correctly in modern era. It seemed absolutely appropriate for our heroes and the Terracotta Sentinels. It's China's own version of fantasy armor, and it has all the connotations that we wanted. Essentially, they said they played a lot of Dynasty Warriors, and there we are. Which makes sense, right? Mark, we began our research into military history books. China has a very long history, and in their arms and armor changed over the course of thousands of years. But there are certain classic looks associated with popular dynasties, such as the Tang Dynasty, which is one of the main influences for the Jade Warriors. I thought it was the Ming Dynasty. There's so many dynasties it's hard to keep up, but I think that's what was said in the interview for the Grand Cathay reveal in Total War Warhammer. Yeah, I guess lost in translation. We took a lot of time into research the difference between Chinese, Japanese, and Korean styles. You've got to look at these things to learn what not to draw as much as what to draw. We then had to be really clear on how ancient Chinese armor actually works, so we could remake it as something suitably fantastical. Yeah, fair play. I mean, everything that we've seen so far, even the stuff that we've seen in Total War, it all looks great. There is a big Chinese community for Total War Warhammer thanks to Grand Cathay. Let's continue with Owen. You need to know the rules before you can break them. In those places, with the Longma as a prime example, you have to know what not to do. We knew how the historical suits of armor looked, but they needed to have that Warhammer spin. Mark, you also have to keep in mind that we're making a miniature. You have to know that the sculptor is going to be able to show your design when they're reduced to a Warhammer miniature. JYT. You also have to be able to make it in plastic. Some of the decisions that we made that deviated from the historical template were taken due to the way you have to lay sprues out. Huh. Okay, so Mark's saying that, right? Well, JYT, but Mark's next. I'm very proud of the Sentinels. I imagine them coming alive with magical fire when they're awakened for war, with light pouring from their armor. I got the idea from an animatronic figure that scared the life out of me when I was a little kid. I imagine them as standing inert all across the land, waiting to be activated in times of war. Some might be covered in vines with offerings at their feet, but others are just part of the landscape. This just makes me think, because they've mentioned this specifically, that there's going to be a lot of pieces when it comes to the with the Sentinel. Oh boy, that scares me a little bit. I'm very clumsy. Okay, we got some last bits here from Owen. Rules-wise, even though we'd already begun to work on Warhammer the Old World by the point that it was needed, we did a lot of work on them using the rules from the 8th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, including a full set of unit profiles. This was to give Creative Assembly the context they needed to fit Grand Cathay into Total War, which is based on that edition of the game. Yeah, this is true. This is part of the interview series I did back in the day where Andy Hall, one of the writers for Creative Assembly, was basically telling me and a few other people, you know, this is what it is and so on. It was absolutely wild. So it's great to see that actually happened, seeing as the stats more or less cover that in Old World. It's very much the similar stats when you look at like Empire State Troops to what they are now. And I imagine that it wasn't too hard to just kind of translate. So that's great. So let's continue here. It was in part to mechanically contextualize a new faction. The entire Total War series is based on that edition of the game. So if a Cathayan unit had movement 6 inches, the Creative Assembly would understand how fast it moved relative to everyone else. Yeah, fair play. It's very curious, actually. I am imagining that for the first few new factions, that's what's going to happen. So if we get Kislev, which I'm expecting, so they'll be very similar. They'll have an 8th edition styling, or that's probably what happened anyway. Oh, so let's just say Nippon, Koresh, or whatever, right? It will be styled in 8th edition styling first, and then moving over there, unless at this point they've gotten a firm grasp of what exactly they want from the old world. It depends on the edition at that point too. Right now everything is kind of fresh, and you know, we're hearing rumors of stuff changing later, so yeah. I mean, this is pretty cool. The article's linked in the description below. They've got some pictures, but I'm pretty sure all these pictures have been shown before. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you all again very, very soon. I can't wait to paint Grand Cathay. I really can't.